Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Monday. I am Julie Ann MEJIA, and this is episode 10 of The Holistic Alternative. Today, we have a truly inspiring guest joining us. He is a decorated retired lieutenant commander of the U.S. Coast Guard, and as a veteran, advocates for use of medical cannabis in his community. After retiring, he decided to create a podcast and platform, the Conversation in Cannabis Christianity podcast, to discuss spiritualism and the connection with plant-based medicine and their benefits. He is a dedicated husband and father and is working diligently on completing his memoir. Today, it is my honor and privilege to welcome Miguel Torrez to the show. Miguel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Julie. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's an honor and privilege to have you today. It's wild to host you. I've been on your show before, and I know many others in the space have as well. So, thank you for being a guest today. I know you have a busy schedule, being a dad and just everything you do for the community. So thank you.
It's all right. I made some time. I'm definitely made some time. Thanks.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it. So Miguel, if you wouldn't mind telling viewers a little bit, what's the connection? How did you get involved with supporting plant-based medicine like cannabis?
So I could start that story a lot of different places. And what I think I'll do is I'll start it with generationally and on my dad's side, predominantly, mostly on my dad's side. And I'm third generation U.S. from Mexico on my dad's side. And my dad, when he was a young child, him and his twin brother, they were actually migrant workers in a migrant field. And when they're doing that stuff, they're poor. They're poor, right? They don't have money, or else they wouldn't be doing that job. And there's a lot of people in the world that are poor and turn to plant-based medicines, whether it's tobacco or alcohol. That's, those are the legal ones. So that's what people usually turn to. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, labor jobs they're hard on the body. So alcohol doesn't really require you to recover the next day. Now, I'm not saying my grandparents did all that, but I'm saying that is the culture that they were in. You get medicinal herbs because access to doctors really wasn't within their reach. So I could start it from there. And then, from there, there's an interesting story with my grandfather. He had a blood platelet issue, and he was actually dying. And he was in a hospital, and nothing was working. And I forget the name of this bark, but it's Cáscara de Nogal. And Nogal is the one that I forget the word to. And but it's the bark. It's the bark of a tree. And my dad went and got it and brought it back and made tea out of it. And my grandfather recovered and came out of the hospital. So that's when I say that kind of culture. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Like, he was in a Western hospital in Michigan, and nothing was working, but that tea worked. That was what he grew up with. You know what I mean? And how did he even know to recall that tea, to know that maybe it would help? I have no idea. But while he's laying there dying on that bed in the hospital, that's what he asked for, and it worked. And So that's, generationally, that's the kind of thing that my dad's side of the family came up with. Poor people use poor means, things things that are easily accessible, right?
No,
So
that's totally understandable. And, a lot of people turn to plant-based medicines as a last resort because of the westernized system put in
yeah,
place.
and that's what's interesting about the whole way this just my family's done. And I'm not saying my generationally. I don't know if I'm sure my grandfather used some marijuana. I'm sure my great grandfather, who was a centenarian, he was 102. He smoked and rolled his own tobacco cigarettes when he was that old. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, that's kind of, that was in my mind as a child growing up, because I saw it happen. It's like, wow, grandpa got better from drinking the tea. And from there, my dad grew up he put himself in a very Western way of thinking in terms of health and medical care. And that's what's different about the story, is that he actually kind of went away from that kind of stuff and devoted his trust in just Western medicine. And he ended up dying earlier than he should have. And so did my grandfather. My grandfather died earlier than he should have as well. And what's something that's kind of interesting is that they both decided to put down the vices that are called cigarettes and alcohol, and it's kind of like, that's interesting. And like I said, my great grandfather was a centenarian, and he was rolling his own tobacco cigarettes when he was 100. So it's kind of like, how does, as I'm thinking about all this as a child growing up, it's like, how does this make sense? I've got a strong line of reasoning saying, don't do this, this, and this, because you'll die young. And then I see my great grandfather, who I only met once. I was very young. My sister and I met him once. My dad made a point. It's just something that's interesting. He was very big on connecting family. So we would make trips down to Texas, and he would drive us into the country, and we'd meet relatives that probably hadn't been seen in a long time. You know what I mean? It's like, wow. So I'm trying to make sense of all this, right? It's like, how does this make sense? My great grandfather, the centenarian, and he smoked. And my grandfather went the Western way and put down cigarettes and alcohol. And I'm sure he used some marijuana every now and then too. And he died young. My father, the same way, even younger. So as I'm looking at this, it's like, this is strange. So plant medicine, that kind of concept has always been there. And I think it's a part of culture around the world. And how we actually get into it, that's the beginnings of it. I could keep going if you want me to, or if I'm not sure what would you like me to do?
No, I want to know really how you started using cannabis as a medicine, both for yourself, and I know your wife has used different plant-based medicines as well for her condition. I'd love to hear more about that.
For me, I didn't use anything in high school. I was more athletic in high school growing up, and like I said, I grew up with a very hard line of reasoning, like, don't do those things. And it was also, religiously based as well. And that was the environment. So athletically, I was athletic in high school, and I did drink in high school. That was pretty much, I tried tobacco in high school. It didn't really work for me. In high school, I grew up in East Lansing, where Michigan State is, and it's a large university. So there's a lot of influence from around the world there, and it was great growing up in that environment. Actually, it's really good. I'm really thankful for having grown up where I did. When I think about where my dad grew up, I'm like, wow, that's a 180-degree turn, right? And so the university brought in a lot of influences. You got 40,000 college students alone, and then you have all these international students. And there is this place behind the high school called The Hill, and that's where, this is in the 90s, right? Early 90s, right? So it's called The Hill. So people would go out and smoke there. Where they'd smoke marijuana or tobacco, then they'd come back to class, right? And I was never into that, but I never really was demonizing him. I don't know, it just didn't click, because I guess I'm not sure if I've been thinking about this every now and then, but maybe it's because I understood that I was dedicated to my thing and they were dedicated to theirs, and knew there's a respect for that dedication. I don't know, but I never really demonized them. And my summer after graduating from high school, I had some friends that did smoke marijuana. They had older brothers, and I tried it. And at that point in my life, I just graduated high school, as I just said. And I had a decision to make about what I was going to do. You know, it's like you graduate high school and it's like a victory, right? But then there's the rest of life still in front of you, and you know it. It's like there's a lot of it out there, and you're just kind of like, whoa.
So how was that for you? I mean, again, I grew up in a similar situation where, you know, it was the devil's lettuce, and it's comical because, you know, we grow up in these very strict environments, but, you know, from a religious background and standpoint, this is as close as, you know, to God's medicine as you can get.
And that's what's interesting about all of it. So that's what's really interesting about it. So I was not an inspired student K through 12, even though my dad was an educator. He was the first one in his family to get a bachelor's and master's degree. He did a lot. He made sure that he did a lot. He wanted to demonstrate that there was value in him, and he did that a lot. And I was actually inspired to learn. I was actually more inspired to learn, and I'm sure there's a more to do with that than just the marijuana. It was, you know, I was 18. I was finally, you know, out of high school. I was picking my classes. There's some core classes that I had to take, but I actually was more inspired to learn, and I performed well. And that only lasted so long. That only lasted so long because of what was going on underneath the surface, right? And that's a lot of apathy. I had a lot of apathy. You know, it was just a, you know, that's just the way it was for me. I could think it's generationally too. I think there's a lot of the Gen X generation is been fed and still feeds on a lot of apathy. You can hear it and see it in a lot of entertainment and news all over the place. But so when the apathy set in, it was kind of like, I like studying, but there's no foundation for it, right? There was no foundation for it. So eventually I had to put it down because it just wasn't working for me. And I finished my my undergrad, and decided that I was going to go into the military. I won't go into all that, but I'm going to stick it to the podcast, right? So from there, while I'm in the military, the Farm Bill Act of 2018 is passed, and a couple years before that, my mother had a very bad back surgery, and it was horrible. You know, she's still messed up, and she doesn't want to pursue the legal route at all. I don't understand. I think she should, because it's that bad. It's that bad. And she was depressed because she went into for the surgery to come out better, right? And here she is, many, many times worse, to the point where just all the daily movement that she was able to do cannot do it without severe pain now. And that pain required heavy drugs, you know, the opioids, right? And she was falling into a depression, and I was worrying about it. I was working a lot, and we had just had our third child, and we had three kids in 4 years, so it was a lot. And then within that time, my dad also passed, which is, you know, part of all of this that falls into it. So at my mother's church, she had a friend who with multiple sclerosis, and she used marijuana, and gave my mom a couple of joints. And I was in the process of researching the Farm Bill Act so I could tell her that she could actually go buy some CBD and it might help, because she's already on antidepressants and it's not working. None of that stuff is working, right? So by the time I have this conversation with her, she's kind of already got it in her mind that she's going to try it, right? But she's not going to take my advice. She's going to take her friend's advice, and that's perfectly all right. You know, it's just funny family things, you know. I see it happening already with my young kids. I'm just like, love each other because you want to be friends with you're an adult.
Absolutely. A lot of times families, unfortunately, they don't listen to one another. You know, it has to be that outside source before they try something new. So
Yeah.
That's totally understandable.
So with her, what she did is her and my dad, when they were first married, they bought a convertible Camaro, and the one place where my dad could get a job as an educator. He had gotten his master's degree, and he was finding nothing but low paying jobs in really rough schools. That's what he was finding in Michigan. And he found an ad at a gym for teachers being recruited to Ketchikan, Alaska.
Oh my
so
God.
so yeah, exactly. This is kind of like, man, when you're thinking about this, it's kind of like, oh my gosh. And this is in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. So technology isn't what it is right now. And they have take this they take this convertible Camaro, and they bought it. My dad had a German Shepherd named Lobo, and they bought a pup tent, and they moved to Alaska. And he later found out that they were recruiting down there, and they were recruiting Hispanic males specifically because they looked more like the indigenous population. And that was just kind of interesting. So they went up there, and
That must have
came
been
back.
big for them to go to this new place, kind of start over. That must have been such a culture shock.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure they hit culture shock too. And then so that story plays in because coming out of my mom's depression, it was wintertime. She chose to walk into her garage, keep the garage door shut, open the roof of the car. Because I forgot to say this detail. Her and my dad bought a convertible later on before he passed, because he's getting close to passing and they know it, and they wanted to enjoy that. So they bought a convertible, and she goes in the garage and puts the top down off the car, and starts smoking that joint. And she didn't smoke all of it. She said she smoked about half of it, but she did start to walk out of her depression. Something happened, right? Something happened. And I when you have these conversations with people, it's kind of like there's some things that happen that are very personal, where you can tell people about the result, but you don't necessarily want to tell them all the details. And that's the way it was with my mother and I when we were having that conversation. So I didn't pry, but something happened there, and I was praying for it too. So I don't believe it was just material things that had the impact. I think sometimes they are tools, and sometimes they're symbolic tools for the memory. Like I said, my mother went into that car because she wanted to remember being with my dad, and she lit that cigarette or that joint, and that's what happened. So that was a big deal to me. And around that time, I was actually, before that, I was at a tour where I was starting to get the idea that my career might end at 20 years. Once you cross over to the officer side of the military, you're no longer, or at least I shouldn't say you're no longer, because I can't say that some people aren't. But the way the system that I was operating in, you don't operate on contracts, you operate on promotions. So, and of course they get tighter as the pyramid goes up. And it's always a bottleneck between 4 and 5. Actually, between 3 and 4, 03 and 04, there's a bottleneck, and there's of course another one between 4 and 5. So I was up there between the 1 and 4 and 5, and I started thinking about it, and I'm going, wow. And at the same time, I'm having health problems in the military too, right? I'm having, I'm over. I didn't look overweight. I didn't really think I looked overweight. I didn't really think that I felt like I was that out of shape, but really I kind of knew it. And this is what's kind of funny about being in a uniform, is that it can help you think about yourself differently. You have a position, you have a uniform of official authority, and that changes the way you think about things over the course of time, I think. And when I started to understand that I was going to end my career, or not going to end my career, but that my career could end at the 20-year marker shortly after that, I started understanding that I was going to have to think differently about almost everything, because I've gotten so used to thinking in, the stereo, the cliche is thinking inside the box, right? But it's true, because you get into patterns of what you know to expect on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual, semi-annual, annual, all these different cycles of time. You prepare for them in advance, and you start developing patterns of thinking that are limited, and they're very restricted. And I knew that that was going to have to change because I would no longer be Lieutenant Commander Miguel Torrez. I'd be Miguel.
Right. No,
So
absolutely. And the military, they train you to think like a certain way, and
conformity,
oh,
conformity, absolutely.
absolutely.
It's all about conformity, and that's what's interesting about kind of observing how do they conform things now. And but yeah, so that is conformity was something that I knew was going to have to happen. So as I'm getting really close to my retirement, and I had this thought, and it was just kind of like, I credit my maker Jesus for good ideas that I just can't take credit for. And even when I think I can take credit, I really can't, because he's given me the understanding. So I got to give him, I won't just say this thought popped into my head. I'm saying that it was the name of the podcast was in my mind, the Conversation, Cannabis and Christianity podcast. And there's other reasons for that. And, in the military, whatever religion or whatever you believe, you can proselytize but not evangelize, which means you can talk about it with other people that think the same way you do, but you can't have a discussion with somebody who's open to it. Just because they're open to it, you can't. So restriction, like I said, a lot of restrictions when you put on uniform. So getting rid of those restrictions and being able to speak,
Freely.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
great.
truly freely. Yeah.
And from there, it I signed up for a podcast course and got started as soon as I retired. It's like, huh. And around that time, at the same time, well, actually earlier, I was living in Virginia at the time. And Virginia, this is during the pandemic, right? So we're talking about 2020, and the beginning of 2021. I retired in February of 2021. So the pandemic is hitting and everything's just getting really weird. People are not understanding what's going on. A lot of things are just odd, very odd. And people are withdrawing and making a lot of lashing out judgments, and it's understandable. Everybody does it, but it's kind of like, it was just a strange time. So we're selling our house in Virginia, and Virginia is starting to pass medical marijuana as well. And I'll add this story in, and then I'll continue on. So we hired a company to clean the house we were selling. We sold our house, and we're moving back to the home we owned in Florida. We bought when we were down here. And these two ladies come in, and they're, the house is empty. I got the kids. We go out. We come back, and they're like, it's all done. It's great. And I start just talking about cannabis and marijuana. It's just because it's kind of like, it was on people's mind more than because the governor, it was in the news, right? The governor's like, it's all the weight is on the governor to make this decision. That's the way these articles were couching it, right? So one of the ladies says, I won't do that. She just drinks. And then the other lady says, smell this. And she pops open a medical cap, and she's like, I got this in Portsmouth. Portsmouth is about 30 minutes. Portsmouth is where I worked. I lived in Newport News. And this is what she said. She's like, and this goes back to a culture of labor, right? And this was kind of interesting. She's like, I can't drink and do this work the next day, but I can smoke this and feel better and still go to work the next day. And I was like, isn't that interesting? Yeah. So I didn't say it. I mean, I didn't really say it, but it's just kind of like, it's just something that's very easy to understand, but so far away. So from there, we sold our place in Virginia, and I was very thankful that Florida already had a medical marijuana patient program in place, because all I had to do was come down, and being a veteran, it was not difficult. I had my VA record of all the stuff you got to tell them is wrong with you. And it's kind of like, that's never a fun thing to do either. So it's a funny thing, health. It's like you don't want bad health, but at the same time, sometimes we're asked to list all the things that are wrong with us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, we work with a lot of veterans through my company with regards to the products. And, in regards to legislation, veterans should be the first people that qualify for these products, whether they're psychoactive or not. A lot of veterans are concerned about losing their federal benefits for testing positive for some of these compositions, which is not okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I know that I'm not at risk of losing my benefits because I'm just not at risk. I'm a legit medical patient. But
I'm talking more of like the active PTSD that are
okay,
still kind
you're
of
talking
like,
about
yeah,
people in the service still.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, all right. I wasn't
correct.
sure. I thought you were talking about veterans
Yeah,
still.
no, they can legally go out and, go with their brothers, for a night of heavy drinking, right? And that's legally acceptable. It's acceptable on base, etc. It's part of the lifestyle. A lot of, my
It's a
husband's a veteran too, so
Yeah, I
it's
remember we were
there.
talking about that during
Yeah.
yeah. It's a funny thing, and this is one thing that I noticed about the military while I was in it. I could see it happening while I was actually in it. Is the leadership was pulling away from alcohol. They were, or at least where I was at. And I'm not sure about, the other branches. They're different, but the Coast Guard leadership was pulling away from alcohol. They were authorizing fewer events with alcohol offered. And that was something that was noticeable, because when you have a morale event, it's relax and unwind. And it's a funny thing to make that one of the only two options that people have available to them in the uniform, knowing that neither one of them in and of themselves or combined together don't deliver any type. Well, then I shouldn't say that. I should say they deliver less medicinal benefits, because I think there are benefits to both. But when it comes to cannabis, it is. I do think that the military and the government will get to a place where active duty will be able to use it on a very restricted and regimented order. Right? It's. I
Which
just don't.
which is good. We don't want people going on the battlefield stoned or drinking regardless, but again, having consumption that is responsible, that should be absolutely a human right to
No,
everyone.
that's
Yeah,
and this is what's different about being a citizen and being in the service is you literally license your life to the federal government,
it's
and
crazy.
it sounds crazy, and it is kind of crazy conceptually, but then there's the return of what they're offering you for having done so, and that's what I'm enjoying right now. So I don't have any complaints about it. Um, it's
Oh, no, and thank you for your
Oh no,
service.
it's all right. It's all
Again,
right. I know. I was just
we love all of our veterans and we appreciate it. I just think the
I
system itself is designed to fail. Unfortunately, there's a lot of hypocritical, elements of the system. It's a system. It's an institution. So,
it,
you know,
and I do think they'll eventually get to that place where they'll I don't know how they'll do it. I don't know how they'll do it, but eventually I think they're going to have to get to a place where
they
cannabis.
allow it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I've yeah, I do think that'll happen. How and when, I don't know, but it is an interesting system, because it does fail, and that's just it. It's kind of like, it's almost like it's been set on a road to failure, slowly, one generation at a time, until either it's gone or replaced. And that's the thing. Nothing's replacing alcohol. It's just either you have the perception of being a drinker, or you don't have the perception. It's kind of, the military's, they say the perception is reality. So it's kind of a funny thing. But I'm not sure if I answered your question all the way or not.
No, we're having an open-based discussion, and you know what? It's awesome to just hear your concepts of your experience with not only the military, but trying to be a consumer after the fact. So it's very different. Life after the military is a whole other thing. Integration back into citizenship is, something that isn't discussed much.
You know, that's exactly the kind of stuff I was talking about. I knew I was going to have to change the way I think, and I say that because I know a lot of people, whether it's the military or not, there's people retire from something, and shortly after that, they die. And when you see that happening, it's kind of like, what happened? And then when you see when you understand and you observe the differences in the person while they were working and when they're not working, a lot of people, and I understand it. It just needs to be a real image and not a false image. We tie our identity to our work because it's what we're doing. It's what we've dedicated our life's energy to. And I completely understand that concept. What I do find that happens to too many of us, human beings on this earth, is that we pick something because we think others are going to, we pick something for the wrong reason. I'll put it like that. We pick it for the wrong reason. What we end up doing is putting up a false image of ourselves and saying, that's who I am, and dedicating it, the time and energy to it. The problem with doing that is it's false, right?
For sure.
So
wearing the mask, whether it be, hey, I am the job or I am this, having the mask is not an easy way to navigate life. You're never truly yourself. So
right.
Yeah, when that mask comes off, it's like, hey man, this is me. This is what I believe in. This is what works well for me. And that's okay. And that might be different than the Miguel that goes to work, and has to put on the front, but
I say that because as I'm getting ready to retire, I don't want to die. Like, I'm thinking,
right.
How do these people die? Like, something's happening on the inside. Yeah, maybe I've had some health issues, but there's something going on in this person's heart and mind that didn't want to go forward in that new direction. They wanted to stay in the past with all the accolades of whatever they had. And I think this also impacted me a lot on that type of understanding, was that's something similar to what my dad did. He didn't put up a false image of himself, but he put up a false image of grace.
And you know what? So that's an amazing point.
I don't mean that as like he did it intentionally. I think his understanding of grace was dysfunctional. And when it comes to grace or the old covenant, he performed like he was the old covenant, but thinking that he was in grace, still trying to earn favor and blessing. And I think that understanding is, we can try to provide that for ourselves. And this is what the whole, this is the whole pull between the world and the spirit, right? So it's kind of like you have the pull of the world and the pull of the spirit that doesn't do things the same way. And his
so in regards to retirement, I had a quick in regards to retirement, right? Having a purpose, right? Just like we talked about, having something to do after retirement that's meaningful, that gives you hope, that gives you that push to keep going. And that purpose, is that really what pushed you to construct your podcast and your platform to discuss not only spiritualism, but what you learned about plant-based medicines and what you saw personally from an anecdotal standpoint?
It's all inclusive, right? It's like, it's everything that you just said right there. And it's also the fact that I can finally give credit to the one who made me and has accepted me with grace, mercy, and goodness and love. And that's the bigger issue. That's like that's the core, right? That's the starting point, because from there comes creation, and that comes cannabis. And I just published, I have a lot of guests on my podcast that are into psychedelics, and not from the party street scene, but from the medicinal healthcare perspective. And these things are not like you said the devil's lettuce. I've heard that before too, because it's kind of like, why would somebody from a pulpit attribute creation to Lucifer? It doesn't make sense. And this is where, if the person is educated on the scripture about what they're saying, there's no creation ability in Lucifer. And I'm sure you're familiar with Hasatan, accuser of the brethren, and it's kind of like, it's an interesting way of thinking about it. It's kind of like, wow, this is interesting. Well,
religion unfortunately takes a lot of fear-based stuff as propaganda and pushes it depending upon, the person preaching. And unfortunately, that's not really what religion is about. Religion is about love and, connection with source, so it's really a scary thing when people that are just like you and I, just normal human beings, take their own propaganda and run with it. So it's a sad thing, you know?
Yeah, yes, I do. I do agree with you. It's go ahead. Sorry.
No,
I
no.
thought,
This is great. So, how many years have you been doing your podcast now? And
oh,
what
that's
kind
right.
of guests do you have on your show? Let's talk a little bit about your show.
You asked me the question about what was going to keep me going. That's right. Was the podcast going to be what was keeping me going? Sorry. Let me finish answering that. Then I'll follow up on that one. Sorry about that, Julie.
No, you're great.
So it wasn't really like I didn't really need something to hold on to keep me going. It wasn't like that at all. It was because my wife and I had made the decision where we were going to switch roles. She was going to start a real estate business, and I was going to take care of the kids. So I had plenty to do.
Yeah.
Plenty to do. This was just something that I wanted. This is just something that it was just, like I said, I believe it was given to me to walk out. And so that's what I'm doing. When it comes to the guests, I don't have like a certain type of guest that I seek out. It's a matter of whether or not the person is comfortable talking about religion and what they believe for public consumption. That's it. I mean, a lot of people are not able to do that. We think about it, and it's not a put down if somebody cannot, because I mean, there's some things where it's kind of like some guests have said. I've invited some people and said, "Hey, I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm just not ready, but when I am, I'll be in touch because this is interests me." And there's others that are saying, "I don't know, I don't have the answers, but I'll gladly talk to you about what I think." And then there's people who believe who have a system in place, and they understand what they believe, and they still want to talk about it, even though they know I'm a Christian, a believer in Jesus, and use cannabis. so it's a lot of, I can't say it's pigeonholed into just like one target audience, because it's more of a person's comfort with themselves. Are they comfortable with themselves enough to say these things for public consumption? And if they are, and they want to do it, and they want to talk about how they came to do what they do and believe what they believe, we always have a good time doing it. It's always sometimes when I'm done hitting when I hit we close out and I hit stop on the record button and the guests and I are still on Zoom, I always want to say, wasn't that fun? Did you have fun? Because
hey, I had a great time, so as someone that's personally been on the show, it was a really unique experience because, again, as you stated, a lot of times business and religion, you don't typically mix the two.
A lot of people say don't.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't. And then there's a lot of people who say, you know what? I like what they can do, but I don't know where they're going. What do they think about life? What do they think of? What do they believe about this world? Because I want to have a firmer understanding about who I'm attaching myself to as we go forward with these things. And that's where it's kind of like, yeah, that's interesting, because even if you disagree with somebody, that's okay. Like it's and this is where it gets
the problem. The problem with our country right now is we used to be able to agree to disagree and have a discussion about it, and not cancel everybody for disagreeing. Unfortunately.
Go ahead. Sorry, Julie.
No. I was just going to say that, unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the climate anymore. There isn't a lot of discussion. It's like, hey, I don't believe what you believe, and I'll never talk to you again. So, that's kind of what I've seen personally. But, this is a newer generation coming in, and people do things differently.
And this is where it's kind of like a little bit of both, I think, because I do see what you're saying, where people are more closed to having conversations like that. And at the same time, I also am meeting a lot of people who are out, more people that are actually open to it. And this is where it's not the opposite of what you just said. It's just that,
well, I guess it depends upon who you're dealing with, right?
Well, you know what? I'm gonna frame it like this. We used to be able to sit, when you said we humans, we used to be able to sit down and have a conversation and figure things out. And I would like to believe that's true. Ideally, I'd like to believe that's true. But because we're humans, I think it's always been something similar to what we're experiencing now, but with the volume not as loud, because there were fewer people who had the opportunity for their voice and opinion to be expressed and broadcast. Now, because of technology, we all have the ability to do that. And we also have free speech, which I'm thankful for. But it is nothing like the concept of free speech to show that there is both good and evil inside the human being. Right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it's like, wow, how do these people, and I know that the I believe we're made with our maker's image on our face, right? So how do we go about doing that? How do we go about doing that when we have our maker's image on our face? It's
No,
interesting.
I totally agree. And you know what, Miguel, I appreciate your time, and we're getting to the end of the segment. It flew by 40 minutes. How can people contact you if they want to hear your podcast? I know you have a memoir that you're working on that we hope to see sometime in the near future over the next year or so. How can people get in touch with you if they want to hear more about your story, some of your interviews?
You can subscribe, subscribe, and you can go to the website. It's posted right there on the StreamYard, ccncpodcast.com. I have a Facebook page. If you cannot find the Facebook page, Julie and I were talking about this earlier, and because my Facebook page has the word cannabis on it, I just can't do easy things like everybody else can who doesn't have the word cannabis on it. So if you cannot access my Facebook, the Conversation Cannabis and Christianity Facebook page, you can find me, Miguel Torrez, Torrez, con Zeta. And then you can access the page from there. So I'm also on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and I have an account on TikTok, but I don't use it. I just, I gotta slow the media down, the social media attention down sometimes. So 3 out of 4 is where I'm going for. That's where you can find me. And I will be moving to YouTube, actually. I'm working with somebody and we'll be putting on all the past episodes of YouTube. Don't worry, past guests, there will be no video. I promise you, I don't publish video. I will not publish it. Don't worry. It'll be audio with some pictures rotating. But that's coming to YouTube. And thank you very much, Drew. I really appreciate the invitation and the time.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I know we just scratched the surface. I look forward to having you again to continue the conversation when your book comes out. I'm really excited for that. And please keep up the amazing work. And thank you for all the beautiful work you do for our community.
Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being a guest today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and hearing Miguel's story. Again, definitely connect with him if you'd like to hear more of his segments. I've been on his show. He's had a lot of beautiful guests on there. Thank you for Dr. Jacqueline and USA Global TV and Radio for all they do. And we will see you again in a few weeks for another beautiful segment. Thank you guys so much. Have a beautiful week. Take care.
Ever dreamed of hosting your own TV show, sharing your story with a global audience? Now's your chance to shine. At USA Global TV and Radio, we make it easy for you to create, host, and broadcast your very own TV show. Whether you're a storyteller, entrepreneur, or industry expert, we help you bring your vision to life. With our exclusive interview, live streaming, and podcasting training, you'll gain the skills and confidence to captivate your audience. Our global platform ensures your voice is heard worldwide. Join our community of creators who are already making an impact, one show at a time. Step into the spotlight. Host your own TV show on USA Global TV and Radio. Book your discovery call today at usaglobaltv.com. Copyright 2025 USA Global TV and Radio. All rights reserved. Terms and conditions apply. To learn more, visit usaglobaltv.com.
USA Global TV and Radio proudly presents Steve Klein Art at steveklein.art.
My name is Steve Klein, born Manchester, England, 1953. My quest in my lifetime is to create artwork from my soul and the deepness within my wildest dreams and fantasies. In 2012, my heart stopped when I was given too much anesthetic for a minor knee operation, and this near-death experience took me to another multidimensional world, an out-of-body experience, and I was given the gift of being blessed by an overwhelming, burning passion to become, for the very first time in my life, an artist with an eternal, passionate desire to bring my art, which I've named multidimensional, subliminal, freeform art, to the world, as only 3% recover from what I experienced, and now in my golden years want to release my cosmic, vital energy through my art to allow people to be a part of my cosmic dance.
To learn more, email roccogoodwine@gmail.com. For VIP pricing, mention USA Global TV and Radio.
What if one simple skill could change the way you connect with the world? What if listening could open doors to deeper relationships, stronger businesses, and a better you? Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, the Listening Mentor, brings you USA Global TV and Radio, a space where voices are heard, ideas are shared, and global communities thrive. Through the elevated listeners' courses and books, you'll master the power of listening, set boundaries with confidence, and transform conversations into opportunities. Join us. Listen, learn, elevate. Whether you're a leader, a coach, a business owner, or someone seeking stronger connections, your journey starts today. Subscribe, learn, and transform today.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Music by Johnny Dies. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative Direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Copyright 2025. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.